If you run a coffee shop or cart, your bar does not usually die because your expensive machine gave out all at once. It dies because a $10 to $50 part decided to give out in the middle of a rush on a Saturday morning or as you're setting up for an event. If you're willing to learn some basic safety mechanics, this is the 80% DIY fix kit that will let you fix most of those problems yourself, keep your rush alive, and avoid $400+ tech calls. Now, obviously, some operations you absolutely do need to call tech for. This is not about those. This is the low-hanging fruit that you can fix in like 20 or so minutes, depending on your gear, to keep your rush going. And if you think to yourself at any point, you'd much rather have me set this up for you, check the link in the description. I'll keep that updated with the best way I can help now or in the future. So let's go and look at the blackboard and talk through it. So as you can see here, I have 3 separate pieces for this, and we'll also talk about failure symptoms too, but for the most part, I really just want to touch on the part you have, the level of annoyance it is. So an A is green for just annoying, L is limp along, and then B is your critical bar down. Your DIY level, it's either you do it yourself, you might do it yourself if you're competent, and then tech. Ideally, we have none on the tech category for this one. Then lastly is just your cost band based on how much money each part's going to cost you. And then you can do your own internal calculations on is it worth stocking the part up towards this 250+ mark or not. Now, real quick, I just want to get some nuances out of the way. First off, there are some things that will just be tech only, you know, a lot of computer boards, changing out heating elements, things like that. So make sure that you have a good balance. And if you are going to work on anything, unplug your machine and make sure it's cold. These are very dangerous and you can hurt yourself if you're not careful. Also, if you have a backup grinder or backup espresso machine, you have a lot more leverage and leniency with this. This is why it's a custom kit rather than just a one size fits all. My mental ROI calculation is if swapping to the backup machine is faster than fixing the part, then I will just swap. So the real secret sauce with this is customize it to your bar and then have your 1 to 2 top people and yourself included trained up on this stuff. So let's go ahead and build that kit with those internals in mind. So let's talk about grinders first. And the major thing you're always going to hear with grinders is your burr sets. Now, obviously, it depends on what burr set you have. Generally speaking, though, these can be between 150 to way higher. As for how difficult it is, it's just an annoyance. You should be seeing this happening over time, and I do typically recommend people DIY it. Now, obviously it is expensive, so you might not want to stock burrs. At the very least, make sure you're ordering a month or 2 in advance because sometimes burrs do sell out. Next is your capacitor. Typically, capacitors are quite cheap to moderately cheap. Now, in terms of problem level, these can be anywhere from a limp along to a bar down. So that's your range with it. Now, most of the time they fail and you'll notice them failing. And I'm going to give this one a maybe. If you only have one grinder, this is a non-negotiable part to keep on hand. But if you have multiple grinders, I'll still keep caps on hand, but maybe just fix it later on in the day. So next up would be clump crushers. These tend to be very cheap, thankfully. And also, we're completely greenlit where it's only a minor annoyance and you can absolutely DIY these things, and you should DIY them. It is an easy thing to do. And I would go ahead and stock up several at the same time. Last, I'm going to just say buttons, which is a bit vague. Buttons includes anything like your on-off switch or a portafilter press button. And normally they're somewhat cheap to not so cheap depending on which one it is. They are honestly a lot more of a bar down situation whenever these fail, because usually your grinder won't turn on, or you can't change your grind setting, or worst of all, the grinder turns on and it just doesn't dispense anything. And then as for DIY level, I'm going to also give this one a maybe, because it depends on what went wrong, how easy your grinder is to work on, and where the button in question is. This is it. This is all I have for the grinder section. In truth, the grinder section doesn't require a lot of different parts. It requires a few specific parts that really don't go wrong that often. If you do have a backup, you can be a lot more lenient with it. I recommend having at least the capacitor, clump crusher, and a couple spare buttons on hand, no matter what. You will save so much money in the long run and so much time. If you do have these 4 parts, most of your oh crap moments with the grinder go away, and it's very nice, and you can keep your morning rush. Great, so let's go ahead and move on to your espresso machine now. There's a lot more parts with the espresso machine that you got to worry about. I think 12 in total for the fix kit, but you'll see them all. We'll do it in 2 stages. So stage 1 is your vacuum breaker, your pressure stats, or temp sensor, depending on if you have an HX machine or not, a high limit, a pump capacitor, an actual pump itself, solenoids. So let's go ahead and talk through each of these parts individually. I want to hit them all as a group, and there's a reason why I put all these in the same area. Vacuum breakers, you're looking at anywhere from, say, $5 to $10 to service it yourself, to more like $100 for a full replacement, again, depending on the make and model. For pressure sensors and temperature sensors, these again are anywhere between like $30 to $120. The temperature sensors tend to be a little bit cheaper than the whole pressure stat system. So again, $1 sign to $2 signs. For the high limit switch, these are almost always in the ballpark of $20 to $30, and so they're quite cheap to have on hand. Your pump capacitors tend to also be fairly cheap to have on hand. I would have to check again, but I believe they're sitting around $30 to $50 right now. Check for yourself on your machine. Pumps, you can normally just replace with a generic like Fluidotech pump, and so I believe those are around $150. So definitely a $2 sign, maybe plus. Then solenoids, I typically find to be in that $2 sign range, ranging from like $75 to $125, depending on which one you're getting. Now, all of these have different levels of difficulty to them, and you really need to be careful and sure that you know what you're doing with them. Vacuum breakers, I think, are really easy to do once you have the machine off. Now, with your espresso machine, if something breaks, it's a lot more likely that your bar is going to fully go down. Reason for it, there's not a whole lot of things outside of just kind of like a buzzing solenoid where once it breaks, it doesn't overheat, underheat, or you don't have enough water pressure anymore. So you got to know how to fix these things in the field, ideally without watching a bunch of YouTube videos on how to do it. I definitely recommend you self-educate before the problem happens. It will be a great return on investment. So let's go and talk through the level of annoyance on each of these. A vacuum breaker valve going bad, it really depends on the severity of the problem, and it can be anywhere from annoying to, and you're going to notice this a lot with espresso machines, bar down. If it will not seal at all, you're going to end up spraying water absolutely everywhere on the inside of your machine, which obviously isn't good. And most of the time, if a pressure stat or a temperature sensor goes wrong, it is just bar down, because you're going to either be overheated or underheated, and that's all you can do with that. High limit switch, also, guess what? Bar down. If that thing trips, then you lose heat to your system. Pump capacitors, guess what? It is bar down usually if you don't catch it early, because if your pump capacitor goes bad, your pump won't spool up and you have no water pressure. If your pump breaks, guess what? We are looking at a bar down situation, because no water pressure means no espresso. Solenoids, we get a nice A for annoyance all the way to, you guessed it, bar down, because your solenoid coil could just buzz at you saying it's mad, or you might not be able to actuate a group. Now, if you're lucky with the solenoid, you can actually just have one group go down. You see the problem. There's a lot of these that completely take your bar all the way down and vary a little bit in terms of difficulty to do. Again, all of these, I'm going to assume you have the machine off and cold. Obviously, in a rush, you might have to finagle some things. Your mileage may vary. So in terms of DIY level, vacuum breakers, I absolutely think are DIYable. Same with your pressure stats and your temperature sensors. Now, if you have a pressure stat, you might end up getting a bit of a maybe, because you will have to recalibrate the temperature of your boiler with the new pressure stat. High limit switches, absolutely DIY. And please, oh my goodness, make sure your machine is off and unplugged. People underestimate that. A lot of times you can just press the button and it's good. But if it ever trips once, I recommend go ahead and replace it because it's going to trip more often. For your pump capacitor, it is a DIY-able, especially if your pump is on the outside of the machine. Replacing the pump yourself, I think, is absolutely DIY-able. And then lastly, your solenoid coils is a DIY to a maybe. The reason for that is it depends on where it is, what went wrong, and how difficult it is to access. So the reason for pairing all of these pieces up the way I did was I think that these are the most common things to go wrong. And they're also some of the bigger critical failures that you'll see, to where these will take your bar down. So now, keeping in line with espresso machines, I want to go into some of the more consumable parts, not necessarily internal fixes, but external items outside of one that don't really happen that often and usually are slow failures rather than critical failures. All right, part 1 is group head gaskets. Part 2 is shower screens. Part 3 is steam rebuilds. And then part 4 is basket springs. Part 5 is dispersion screws. Now, not every machine has a dispersion screw, so you gotta check that out. For group head gaskets, these are real cheap. For shower screens, these tend to be real cheap. Steam rebuild kits, a little bit more expensive. I recommend if you are gonna work on the inside of your steam one, you gotta go ahead and do the whole thing. So we're gonna give that $2 signs. Dispersion screws, also just a couple bucks. Now, the level of annoyance with these, you're going to notice something. Usually, group head gaskets, you get a little water leaking out of the side. It's annoying. Shower screens, it just channels a little bit. It's annoying. Steam rebuild, you typically just have a slightly leaky steam one head. It's annoying. Basket springs, your portafilter basket likes to fall out. It's annoying. Dispersion screws, well, those might clog. I guess those are a little bit more than annoying, aren't they? These could be limp along if you are terrible with preventative maintenance. But realistically, I would hope that that's more annoying than anything. Should you DIY them? Yes, on all, except maybe your steam rebuild kit. You might not feel as comfortable. They're not hard. It takes a little bit of time, okay? That's the whole thing. All of these, you should absolutely be doing this yourself. Let me say it to the camera. All of those, you should absolutely be doing yourself. Again, steam rebuild, maybe, maybe not. I think they're not hard to do. I really don't. So save yourself the money because they're just a little bit time consuming. You're going to save a ton of money on techs, and they tend to fail slowly rather than all at once, so you'll know it's coming. So make sure you add those into your rebuild kit. I recommend as many group head gaskets as you have group heads. And for the shower screens, if you can spring for something more like a precision IMS basket, I typically recommend that because they just last a whole lot longer. They stay a lot cleaner. After you do that, you really only need one spare if you're doing those precision baskets. But if you're going to stay with OEM, go ahead and do all three. Speaking of OEM, group head gaskets, I like the silicone gaskets. I think they last a lot longer. I believe Cafe Lot is the company, or Cafe Lot, excuse me, that I tend to buy from. So if they have those, I think they're great. Basket springs, you might knock it out on accident whenever you knock out your puck and you lose it. That's a very annoying thing, and they're not expensive to stock, so just have a couple on hand. And same with dispersion screws. Typically, if I'm going to be swapping out the shower screen, I'm going to at least inspect those dispersion screws, again, if you have it. And if they seem particularly beat up, or if the head is stripped at all, go ahead and swap it. It's not worth risking it sticking later on. So now let's talk about some consumables and tools that I think every kit needs to have. Your machine might need a little bit more, might need a little bit less, but this is what I always want in my tool bag and feel like I can typically do the minimum standard to make sure that I can service the machines. So we've got two things. First, we got our consumables and we have our tools. Now, I just want to walk through real quick what I recommend every single fix kit has in terms of consumables. Some kind of espresso detergents for sure. I tend to use Cafezza, or however you say that, which is your detergent. And then I like Rinsa for any milk grime, absolutely food grade grease. Some kind of high quality PTFE tape. like Blue Monster. This is a controversial one. I like no aux ID for connectors and terminals, some kind of grinder pellets. Then lastly, there's some things like O-ring packs, specifically Viton, brush washers, and PTFE flats. Tend to just order those off of Amazon. I see that this is a little hard to read. We're going to move to a different marker color for this side to make it a little bit easier, hopefully. And then so for your tools, what you want usually is like an O-ring pick, which is great for removing group head gaskets, stubby Phillips and flats, screwdrivers, a metric hex set, like an Allen key. I like Knipex pliers. You can get away with adjustable, but I don't recommend that. Specifically the plier wrenches. You want a multimeter if you're feeling good about it, a headlamp with an inspection mirror, so a handheld mirror that you can use to see, and back flush baskets. Just make sure you also have like a marker pen on to label things as you go. Now, I would also say if you know there's a specific fitting that your machine uses, so for instance, my backup machine I know has a lot of 20 millimeter flare fittings. I went ahead and got a 20 millimeter crow's foot fitting just so I could make sure I could service that machine without it being too much trouble. Those copper fittings like to strip. So if you know your machine has a tool, go ahead and get it. But for the most part, this should cover most and will let you do the basic maintenance on almost everything you see. Now, I just want to talk to you about the kit for a second. Remember, I'm calling it the 80% DIY fix kit. You might find that it only fixes 40% of your problems, and you might find that it always fixes all of your problems. Usually that's very water and machine quality dependent. Is your gear new? Is it old? Do you have backups? All of those things factor in. That to say, you have to customize it for your setup rather than just what I'm telling you here. You need to do some actual ROI on, is it worth having a $450 burr set, like for my case, on hand so I can swap it whenever the time comes? The answer is no, because I know after I've swapped it, that thing's probably going to be good for the next, 8 months for us. I'm not going to order that again until it's getting close to the time that it's needed, then order it about 2 months in advance just to make sure that it doesn't sell out on me. So things like the age of your gear, the refurb history, your preventative maintenance schedule, the quality of your water, all of that matters. You need to take everything into account when building your own 80% fix kit. But if you are a shop or an operator, you absolutely should be doing this. So you're eventually going to deal with rare failures. There's nothing you can do about that. It's not worth preventing all eventualities, but this fixes most of the problems I see that takes your bar down on a busy morning. So let me give you 3 steps, just kind of walk through this as a mental model and then go back through the video and start building out your list of parts that you want, parts you need. I recommend OEM unless you know what you're doing. So here's a 3-step. 1, list your gear and backups. This will let you know, first off, what you have and what your redundancy is like. If you have a lot of gear and very little redundancy, you're going to need a big fix kit. Step 2 is decide your sacrifice. Are there any parts that you would be okay going down and you just sacrifice a certain product offering? If my main grinder goes down, I'm okay to get rid of half calf for a little while. And then lastly, build out your fix kit. I recommend starting with the low-hanging fruit ones that were easy to DIY. I would go from things of the highest impact, lowest cost and lowest difficulty to the opposite end of that. Go ahead and make sure you're building it out in a smart way. There's no reason to go ahead and buy a solenoid valve if you don't have clump crushers. Now, the reason I think it's so important to build out this kit is a single morning down, depending on how busy you are, that might cost you $1,000 that you could have had come in. And on top of that, if you have to emergency call a tech because let's say your brew boiler went bad or something like that, and it turns out it was just a high limit switch, but I call up the tech and I say, I need you out here right now. He's probably going to charge me $200-$300 minimum to get out there and then also charge for the part. You lost whatever your revenue was for the morning and you ended up paying, and your customers are mad, and your baristas don't have a job for the morning, or you're still paying them and you don't have any work for them. Do you see how this all adds up? What might have been a $50 part, a little know-how on your end, and half an hour of time just cost you $1,500. Way in excess of the whole build kit, maybe including some expensive burrs too. So having this on hand and allowing yourself to fix your machine if it goes down on the low fruit can save you literally thousands a year for a few $100s of parts and tools. I recommend everyone does this. It is 100% worth it in my opinion. Now, if you think that this is kind of a lot to juggle on top of just being a good barista and a good shop owner, I agree, but this is the world that I kind of live in. If you want help making your bar faster, more reliable, less stressful to run, and also eventually customize this fix kit and a reliability blueprint to your bar, go ahead and click the link in the description. I'll keep that updated with the best way I can help you now or in the future. But either way, if you just build out even the basic generic version of what we just talked about, I think that it will save you a lot of money and a lot of headache over time and just give you a lot of confidence that if something breaks, it can be fixed and it's not going to completely destroy your weekend and your sales. Now, you've got a kit that can keep your bar online in most situations, and that's great. But if you're reliably making mediocre espresso, you are still losing customers. Shops with a clear flavor identity and great espresso tend to see better feedback, more return customers, and better word of mouth. So while making sure your machine stays alive is great, click the video on the screen and I will show you how to make a flavor identity that will keep your customers coming back for your espresso.